He walked in to buy a ring for another woman. He walked out knowing he had a son. Kang Tai-shin stepped through the glass doors of Lumiere Jewels, Seoul's most exclusive jewelry boutique, and the entire staff forgot how to breathe. He was not a man who announced himself with words. He announced himself with silence, the kind that pressed against your chest and made your hands shake. 3 bodyguards remained outside. He had told them to stay back. He preferred to do quiet things quietly. He was here for an engagement ring. In 3 weeks, he would stand before 500 guests and marry Seo Rin, the daughter of a powerful political family. The union had been arranged with the precision of a business merger because that is exactly what it was. There was no love in it. There was strategy. There was alliance. There was the cold mathematics of power. But Tai-shin had made peace with that. Love, he had decided years ago, was a luxury that men like him could not afford. He adjusted his cufflinks, stepped further into the boutique, and stopped walking. His body stopped before his mind told it to. Because standing behind the main display counter, in a tailored ivory blouse, with her natural hair pinned elegantly above her shoulders, was a woman he had spent 6 years trying to forget. Maya, his ex-wife. The woman he had divorced and destroyed himself in the process. She had not seen him yet. She was bent slightly over a glass case, carefully lifting a diamond necklace to show a customer, speaking with that same quiet confidence he had once fallen completely in love with. Her voice floated toward him, warm, professional, precise. She had always known how to make people feel like the most important person in a room. Then the customer moved, and Tai-shin saw the boy. He was small, maybe 5 years old, sitting on a stool behind the counter with a children's book open in his lap. He had Maya's mouth, that slight upward curve at the corners that made a smile look like a secret. But his eyes were different. They were sharp and deep-set, framed by thick lashes. They were the exact shape of Tai-shin's own eyes, the ones he saw every morning in the mirror. The boy looked up from his book and caught Tai-shin staring. He did not flinch. He smiled instead, wide, unguarded, revealing a single dimple on his left cheek. Tai-shin's engagement ring catalog slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor. The sound made Maya look up. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. The boutique seemed to suspend itself, music fading, conversation dulling, the whole world pressing pause. Maya's expression shifted through shock, then pain, then something harder and more careful. She straightened. She set the necklace down. She held herself together the way people do when they have had years of practice falling apart privately. "Mr. Kang," she said finally, her voice perfectly controlled. "Welcome to Lumiere." He stared at her. Maya. Just her name. Just one word. But it landed between them like a stone through glass. The customer, sensing something, quietly excused herself and moved toward another section of the store. A junior employee rushed over to retrieve the fallen catalog from the floor. The boy on the stool had gone back to his book, though his eyes kept flicking upward with innocent curiosity. "Is there something I can help you with?" Maya asked. Tai-shin could not stop looking at the child. "Who is he?" Maya's jaw tightened. "He's my son." "His name?" A pause, brief but heavy. "Ethan." Tai-shin moved slightly closer to the counter, not threatening, just drawn, the way metal moves toward a magnet without meaning to. Ethan chose that moment to look up again, and when he did, something in Tai-shin's chest cracked clean down the middle. The boy had his dimple, his exact dimple. His grandmother had called it the Kang family mark, said every firstborn Kang son carried it without fail. "How old is he?" Tai-shin asked quietly. "I think," Maya said, her voice careful as a surgeon's hand. "You should focus on whatever brought you in today. Maya, we have an excellent collection of engagement pieces in the East Wing, she continued, her professional mask firmly in place. "I'm sure we can find something suitable for the occasion." She knew. She had seen the news, the same as everyone else in Seoul. Kang Tai-shin's engagement to Seo-rin had been the headline of every society column for 2 months. Maya had probably known he would walk through a jewelry store door eventually. She had perhaps even prepared for it. But standing here, watching her hold herself together with bare hands, Tae-shin understood that no amount of preparation could have made this easy. He did not move toward the east wing. He looked at Ethan one more time and said, "He has the Kang dimple." Maya said nothing, but her hands, resting on the glass counter, pressed down just slightly harder. Tae-shin bought nothing that afternoon. He left the store, got into his car, and sat in silence for 11 minutes while his driver waited without speaking. Then he pulled out his phone, canceled his afternoon meetings, and stared out the window at the glittering street as a memory he thought he had successfully buried came back to him with the force of a flood. He remembered marrying Maya 8 years ago, quietly, in a small ceremony that his family had never approved of. She was American, a graduate student studying gemology who had come to Seoul on a fellowship. He had met her at an art gallery where she had been examining a piece with the kind of focused attention that made him want to know what she was thinking. He had introduced himself. She had not recognized his name. He had found that so remarkable that he had invited her to dinner on the spot. They were married within a year. His mother had wept, not from joy. His father had called it an embarrassment. His lieutenants had whispered that it was a weakness. But for 2 years, Tai-shin had been something he had never been before and has never been since. Genuinely happy. Then the threats had started. Not against him, against her. Anonymous messages. A broken window at the apartment she kept for her research. A car that followed her home 3 nights in a row. His enemies, sensing the one soft point in his armor, had aimed directly at it. And Tae-shin, who had made a career of calculated decisions, had made the most painful calculated decision of his life. He had ended the marriage, not because he stopped loving her, because he loved her too much to let her become a casualty of a war she had never chosen to enter. He had sat across from her with divorce papers on the table and said things he knew would make her hate him, because hate was safer than love when danger was involved. He had told her she was a liability. He had told her she did not belong in his world. He had watched her eyes go from hurt to fury, to something final and closed, and he had signed the papers and let her walk away. He had not known she was carrying his child. Sitting in the car, doing the arithmetic he had been avoiding since the moment he walked into that boutique, he counted backwards. Ethan appeared to be approximately 5 years old. Maya had left 6 years ago, which meant she had been pregnant when she walked out of his life, which meant that for 5 years there had been a boy alive in the world who was his son, and he had known nothing about it. He told his driver to go home. He went upstairs, poured himself a drink he did not touch, and sat alone with that knowledge until morning. He went back to the boutique the next day, and the day after that. He told himself he was shopping. He ordered a custom bracelet. He requested consultations on a watch chain. He invented reasons with the careful creativity of a man who refuses to admit what he is actually doing. What he was actually doing was watching Ethan, watching the boy stack sample boxes into towers when the store was quiet, watching him greet elderly customers with a small formal bow that he had clearly been taught and had clearly mastered, watching him laugh, that sudden whole-body laugh that Tae-shin recognized from the inside out, because it was his own laugh, the one he only ever released when he forgot to be guarded. On the 4th visit, Ethan spoke to him directly. "You come here a lot," the boy said matter-of-factly from behind the counter. He was eating a small orange, peeling it with focused concentration. "Do you work nearby?" Tae Shin, who made grown men lose their composure with a single glance, was momentarily speechless. "I do," he managed. "My mom says this is the best jewelry store in Seoul," Ethan said. "She built it herself, from nothing." He said this with such casual pride that it landed like a punch. "She did," Tae Shin said. "She's very talented." Ethan nodded, apparently satisfied with this assessment, and offered Tae Shin a segment of orange. Tae Shin accepted it. Maya emerged from the back office at that exact moment and found her ex-husband and her son sharing an orange across the jewelry counter. The look on her face was unlike anything Tae Shin had ever seen from her before. It was terror dressed as composure, shaking behind steady eyes. "Ethan," she said gently, "go finish your homework in the back." Ethan slid off his stool obediently. "Bye, mister." He paused, looking at Tae Shin. "Kang," Tae Shin said. "Bye, Mr. Kang." He disappeared through the back door. The moment he was gone, Maya's composure cracked at the edges. "Stop coming here," she said quietly, so none of the staff could hear. "I need to know the truth." "You don't get to need things from me." "Maya, you sat across from me," she said, her voice dropping lower and harder. "And you told me I was a liability. You told me I didn't fit into your life. You signed those papers without looking at me once. So whatever you think you need right now, I want you to remember that you already made your choice. 6 years ago. I didn't know about him. I know you didn't." Her voice did not soften. "Because I chose not to tell you." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Tae Shin had ever heard. "He's mine," he said. It was not a question. Maya looked at him for a long moment, and then, quietly, devastatingly, "Yes." Tae Shin exhaled slowly. He pressed both hands flat on the counter, steadying himself. "Why didn't you?" "Because you made it very clear," she said, "that your world was too dangerous for me. Why would I hand you a child to put in the middle of it? That's not fair." "Fair?" She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Tae Shin, I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you handed me divorce papers. I was alone in a foreign country. I had no family here. I had nothing. So I built something. I built all of this." She gestured at the boutique around them, the marble and glass and soft gold lighting. "Without you. And Ethan has never gone without anything. Not love, not security, not a mother who would burn the world down for him." She met his eyes steadily. "So don't come in here and act like something was taken from you. You gave it up." He had no defense. She was right. And they both knew it. But knowing someone is right does not make the grief smaller. He stood there with 5 years of his son's life pressing down on him like weight he hadn't known he was carrying until it was already there. "I want to know him," he said finally. "I'm not asking for what I lost. I'm asking for what's left." Maya said nothing for a long time. Then, "I'll think about it." It was not a yes, but it was not a wall. He took it. He spent the next 2 weeks proving, carefully and without pressure, that he was serious. He did not push. He did not demand. He showed up with patience he had never previously possessed, because Ethan was worth developing patience for. Maya allowed supervised meetings, an hour here, an afternoon there. Tae Shin took Ethan to a basketball court near the river, where the boy turned out to have an alarming natural talent for shots that should not have gone in, but somehow did. They ate ice cream at a small shop 2 blocks from the boutique, and Ethan told him, very seriously, about a conflict at school involving a boy who had broken his pencil case. "What did you do?" Tae Shin asked. "Mom says you don't solve problems with fighting," Ethan said, licking his cone. "So I told the teacher. And then I told the boy that if he did it again, I would tell everyone he cried during the nature documentary about penguins." Tae Shin pressed his lips together to stop a smile. Effective. Mom says I have her problem-solving skills, Ethan said, satisfied. You do, Tae-shin agreed, thinking that the boy also had his father's instinct for leverage. He was, in those stolen afternoon hours, happier than he had been in 6 years. He did not notice that he was being followed. Seo-rin Park had not survived 28 years in Seoul's elite circles by being naive. She had noticed the cancelled meetings, the afternoons Tae-shin could not account for. The change in his energy, that slight thawing of a man who had always operated at precisely controlled temperature. She hired 2 private investigators on a Tuesday. By Thursday, she had photographs. By the following Monday, she had a full report. She read it 3 times. Ethan Johnson, 5 years old, son of Kang Tae-shin and Maya Johnson, formerly Maya Kang. Born 14 months after the divorce was finalized. Currently residing with his mother above her jewelry boutique in the Gangnam district. Seo-rin set the report down on her desk and sat very still. She was not a woman given to panic, but she understood clearly what this meant. She had not agreed to marry Kang Tae-shin for love. She was not sentimental enough to confuse strategy for romance. But she had agreed to marry his power, his influence, his name. And a hidden child changed the architecture of everything. Because if Tae-shin had a son, a biological heir, then the terms of their arrangement were no longer what she had calculated them to be. And worse, the way Tae-shin's eyes had looked in those surveillance photographs, watching the boy play basketball, laughing at something the child had said. She had never seen his face look like that. Not once in all the months of their engagement. He had never looked at her the way he looked at that child. And she knew, with a certainty that felt like ice water, that Maya was the reason why. Seo-rin picked up her phone and made a call she would later pretend she had never made. Ethan disappeared on a Wednesday afternoon. He had walked out of school at the usual time, turned left toward the waiting car as he always did, and then he was simply gone. The driver found an empty pavement and a small blue backpack lying on its side near the school gate. He called Maya immediately. Maya called the school called the police. And in the space of 40 minutes, Maya's entire world collapsed into a single screaming absence. She called Tae-shin. She had not planned to. Her hands called him before her mind gave them permission, because somewhere beneath 6 years of armor, she still knew, in the marrow of her bones, that when something was truly, catastrophically wrong, Kang Tae-shin was the most formidable force that could be pointed in any direction. He picked up before the second ring. "Ethan is gone," she said. Her voice, to her own horror, was shaking. "Someone took him. He was outside school, and now he's just—" A sound escaped her that was not quite a word. Tae-shin's voice on the other end went very quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "When?" 40 minutes ago. "Don't move," he said. "I'm coming." He arrived in 11 minutes in a car that did not obey traffic signals. He walked through Maya's door, and in the next 4 minutes had made 6 phone calls, spoken to 3 people in a language of clipped, coded instructions, and deployed what Maya could only describe as an army into the streets of Seoul. People she had never seen before materialized, men in nondescript clothing, who fanned out with the efficiency of a mechanism that had been built for exactly this kind of moment. "Someone planned this," he said, sitting across from Maya in her small office above the boutique. His voice was controlled, but his hands— She noticed his hands. They were pressed flat on his knees, and they were not completely still. "This wasn't random. Ethan has no profile. No one knew about him publicly. Until recently," Maya said. Her eyes met his. "Until you started coming here." Tae-shin held her gaze. "Someone who knew about him from my side." They both sat with the weight of that. 40 minutes later, one of his men called. Financial transfers had been traced. A phone, used only twice, had been triangulated. A name was produced. The name was Seo Rin Park. Tai Shin sat completely still for 10 seconds. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and said to Maya very quietly, "Stay here." "Tai Shin?" "I will bring him back," he said. He looked at her with something so stripped of its usual armor that Maya had to look away. "I promise you, I will bring him back." The warehouse was on the edge of the city, near the port, where the sound of the water swallowed other sounds. Tai Shin's people had found it in under an hour, the kind of operational speed that came from years of building a network that extended into every shadow in the city. He went in with 4 men, through a side entrance, in silence. Ethan was in a back room, sitting on a wooden crate, still wearing his school uniform. His face was tear-stained, his hands were trembling, but he was not hurt. When the door opened and he saw Tai Shin step through it, something in the boy's face broke open with a relief so total it was almost unbearable to witness. "Mr. Kang," he breathed. "I've got you," Tai Shin said. He crossed the room fast and crouched in front of the boy. Then a second man emerged from the shadows at the far side of the room. He raised a gun. Not at Tai Shin, at the boy. A message Seo Rin had apparently instructed, in case of intervention. There was no time to think. Tai Shin moved in front of Ethan. The gun fired. He took the bullet in the left shoulder, the force spinning him back but not down. One of his men neutralized the shooter before a second shot was possible. Tai Shin, bleeding, turned immediately to check the boy. Ethan was pressed against the wall behind him, shaking, eyes wide. "Are you hurt?" Tai Shin asked him. Ethan shook his head. Tai Shin exhaled. He pressed his right hand to his shoulder and let himself feel, briefly, how much it hurt. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." He carried the boy out of the warehouse with one functioning arm. Ethan had both arms around his neck and did not let go the entire way. At the hospital, Maya arrived before the surgery was finished. She sat in the waiting room with Ethan pressed against her side, his face buried in her shoulder. The doctors told her Tai Shin would be fine. The bullet had not hit anything vital. He was fortunate. She had nodded at all of this information and felt, underneath the relief, something large and complicated shift inside her. Something she had worked 6 years to hold exactly still. When they let her in to see him, Tai Shin was lying in the hospital bed, looking more human than she had seen him look in years. Reduced. Real. Ethan slipped off her hand and went to stand at the side of the bed with the solemn attentiveness of a child who has decided something is important. "Why did you do that?" Ethan asked him. "Why did you step in front of the gun?" Tai Shin looked at the boy. Then he looked at Maya. Maya felt the question hanging in the room, the question beneath the question, the real one, the one she had been carrying for 5 years, trying to figure out when and how and whether to answer it. She sat in the chair beside the bed. She looked at her son's face, then at the face of the man lying in that bed with a bullet wound in his shoulder because he had moved in front of her child without hesitating. And she said the words she had been holding on to since before Ethan could walk. "Because he's your father, Ethan." The room was absolutely silent. Ethan turned to look at Tai Shin. His face cycled through confusion, then something fragile and searching, then a stillness that was too old for 5 years. "You're my dad?" Tai Shin's voice, when it came, was not the voice of a Mafia boss. It was the voice of a man who had not allowed himself to cry in decades and was now losing that battle completely. "Yes," he said. "I am." Ethan climbed up onto the side of the hospital bed, carefully avoiding the bandaged shoulder, and pressed himself against Tai Shin's side. He said one word, small, uncertain, testing the shape of it for the first time. "Dad." Tai Shin put his right arm around his son and did not speak for a long time. Maya pressed her fingers to her mouth. She looked at the ceiling. She did not let herself fall apart, not all the way, but she allowed herself the small mercy of letting her eyes fill. Seo Rin's fall was swift and complete. The financial records, the phone traces, the testimonies of two hired men who each decided, independently and rapidly, that cooperating was preferable to the alternative. All of it reached the right people within 48 hours. Her family attempted to contain the story. They failed. The engagement was canceled in a one-line public statement from Tai Shin's office, and Seo Rin found herself at the center of a criminal investigation that her family's influence could not reach far enough to bury. Everything she had arranged the kidnapping to protect disappeared because of it. Months passed. Tai Shin and Maya did not rush anything. They had already made the mistake of moving at the wrong speed once. Him with his decision to end their marriage. Her with her decision to leave without telling him the truth. This time they moved carefully, like people who understood the precise weight of what they were carrying. He became part of Ethan's life. Properly this time. He was there for school pickups and bad dreams and the basketball games where Ethan made shots that had no business going in. He was there for the long conversations and the ordinary Tuesdays and the hundreds of small moments that no headline would ever record, but that, accumulated over months, became the architecture of something real. He and Maya talked, slowly, honestly, in ways they had never managed during their marriage, because they had always been operating under the pressure of other people's opinions, other people's threats. He told her things he had never told her. She told him things she had held alone for 6 years. They fought sometimes, clean, clear-aired fights that ended without damage, because they had both learned, expensively, what damage cost. On the evening of Lumiere Jewel's grand flagship opening, an event attended by the kind of people who made cities move, Tai Shin arrived holding Ethan's hand. The showroom was everything Maya had worked toward. Tall ceilings, soft light, cases of extraordinary pieces that she had built a company to create. She stood near the entrance greeting guests, wearing a dress the color of deep water, and when she saw them come through the door, Tai Shin in a dark suit, Ethan in a small matching blazer, both of them with that same walk, that same way of carrying themselves, she pressed her lips together and breathed. Tai Shin walked through the crowd with Ethan. He stopped in front of her. The guests nearby, sensing something, went quiet in the way crowds do when the air changes. He reached into his jacket pocket. He produced a ring box. He opened it. The diamond caught the showroom light and scattered it in every direction. Not ostentatious, not showy, but perfectly made. Precise and luminous and built to last. Tai Shin went down on one knee, right there in the middle of everything Maya had built without him. "The first ring," he said, his voice low and steady and carrying in the hush, "was for a future other people chose for me." He looked up at her. "This ring is for the future I choose myself." Ethan, standing beside him, looked up at Maya with his father's eyes and his mother's smile, and the dimple they both knew, now, was something that would pass down through generations. "Mom," he said simply, "say yes." Maya looked at the man kneeling in front of her. She thought about 6 years of building something from nothing. She thought about all the mornings she had watched Ethan sleep and wondered, and chosen not to reach out. She thought about a warehouse on the edge of a city, and a man who had stepped in front of a bullet without thinking, because some things do not require thought. She looked at her son. She looked at the ring. She looked at Tai Shin. "Yes," she said. The room erupted. Ethan launched himself at both of them simultaneously, wrapping his arms around as much of the two of them as he could reach. Tai Shin caught him with one arm and rose to his feet. And for a moment, just a moment, the camera of the world pulled back from the glittering showroom and captured the three of them. a Mafia boss who had learned that the thing he had been afraid of losing was the thing he had already thrown away. A woman who had built an empire on the ashes of Heartbreak, and a 5-year-old boy with a dimple, standing in the middle of all that light. Not a perfect family. Something better than perfect. Something true. If this story moved you even a little, smash that like button right now. It took everything to bring this one to life. Subscribe if you're not already part of this family, because we drop emotional stories like this every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. And drop a comment below. Tell us, did you see that proposal coming? Or did Ethan's say yes destroy you completely? We read every single one. See you in the next story. The glass doors of the 42nd floor had never been opened by force before. They were designed to suggest invitation, not submission. Floor-to-ceiling panels overlooking the Singapore skyline, framed in brushed chrome, reflecting the kind of wealth that did not announce itself. The kind that simply existed, heavy and self-assured, like a mountain that had always been there. Ji Tae-hyun did not knock. He never knocked. He moved through the lobby like a man who had forgotten that other people occupied space, his charcoal suit damp at the shoulders from the rain outside, his jaw set so tight that the muscle along his cheek twitched with every step. His 2 men flanked him, but said nothing. They had learned long ago that when their boss looked like this, eyes flat, breath controlled, silence was the only currency worth spending. The receptionist rose from her chair. "Sir, you cannot." He placed one hand on her desk and looked at her, and she sat back down. He pushed through the inner doors. The office was immaculate, not decorated, curated. Every object in the room had been chosen with the same precision as a chess move. The desk was a single slab of pale ash wood, clean, with only a laptop and a glass of water on its surface. The bookshelves held no fiction. Floor plans, financial journals, international trade law, one framed photograph turned slightly away from view. The air smelled of something light, sandalwood maybe, and underneath it, the cold neutrality of air conditioning set just below comfort. She was standing at the window when he came in. She did not turn around immediately. She let him cross the room. She let him reach the desk. She let him slam the documents down. Bank transfers, shipping manifests, corporate registration papers, 8 months of intelligence that his best analysts had spent 6 weeks piecing together. And she let the sound of it echo once against the glass before it died. Then she turned. Amara. Johnson looked exactly as she always had. That was what struck him first, and he hated himself for noticing. The same posture, straight, unhurried, the kind that came not from training but from a woman who had decided long ago never to shrink in a room. Her locks were pinned back. Her suit was white, tailored to the millimeter. Her eyes, dark brown, unflinching, found his and held them with the same expression she had worn the last time he saw her, at a banquet in Seoul, when he had taken another woman's hand in front of 400 people and called her the one who truly understood his world. Amara had smiled softly that night too. He should have been afraid of that smile. He understood that now. "You're funding my enemies," he said. His voice was low, controlled. It was the voice he used when he was close to something he could not afford to lose control over. Amara did not blink. She stepped forward around the side of the desk, slowly, the way a person moves when they are, not afraid of the distance closing between them. "You taught me how power works," she said. The room went very quiet, and then everything that came before it rushed back. 4 years of it, the whole weight of a life they had built together, the empire she had helped construct from the foundations up, while he had looked past her, towards something easier to hold. 4 years earlier, Ji Tae-hyun was not a man given to doubt. He had inherited the leadership of his syndicate at 29 after his father's sudden death, and he had spent the 6 years following that inheritance, turning a regional criminal organization into an international financial network, so sophisticated that Interpol had 3 different task forces dedicated to untangling it and had succeeded with none of them. He had legitimate business interests in shipping, real estate, and private equity. He had contacts in 7 governments. He had a reputation that preceded him into every room by at least 5 minutes. What beyond he had not expected was Amara. They had met through a mutual associate in Geneva, at a conference that served as a polite front for the kind of conversations that could not be held in official meeting rooms. She was there representing a financial consulting firm that handled accounts for clients whose names never appeared on the paperwork. She was 26. She spoke 3 languages without accent, understood derivative structures the way other people understood weather, and had a stillness about her that he had never encountered in a room full of people who were performing. He had asked her a question about a currency hedging structure he was considering, expecting the cautious, qualified answer of someone trying not to overstep. She had told him he was thinking about it wrong, explained why in 4 sentences, and then looked away, as though the conversation were finished. He had followed her across the room. They were married 8 months later. The people around him did not understand it. Not his lieutenants, not his mother, not the associates who whispered that he had lost his mind over a woman who was too quiet, too serious, too foreign. They were looking for the obvious reasons. The way she looked, the way she carried herself. They assumed it was simple. What they didn't understand was what Tae-hyun himself only partially understood. That he had married her because she was the most capable person he had ever met, and that some part of him, buried under years of front and performance, had recognized it and reached for it before his pride could interfere. She became the invisible architecture of everything. She restructured his offshore accounts through a series of holding companies so legally distant from each other that no single transaction could be traced to its origin. She managed relationships with the legal teams in 5 countries who existed to make problems disappear. She built the corporate front structures, import companies, logistics, firms, a small chain of private members' clubs that generated clean revenue at the right intervals to satisfy quarterly scrutiny. She advised him on which partnerships to enter and which to decline, and when he overrode her and entered the wrong ones, she quietly managed the exits without ever saying she had told him so. She told him once, in the early years, sitting at the